All right, let's go get your birthday chicken.
Yes!
Do you have to tell them how old you are?
Yeah, I think I have to show my ID.
Danielle Nerman just had a birthday. And on her birthday, she takes free stuff very seriously.
This is a fair amount. Look at that.
Free?
Oh, that's nice.
Where are you guys eating? Can I come over?
Do you want my corn fritter?
Yeah. You promised me the corn fritter.
More businesses now offer birthday freebies. You can get everything from Lego to, corn fritters. But is there really such a thing as a free lunch? Welcome to The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Havershrud. When pilots or rail workers threaten to strike, you probably have an opinion on unions, employers, whether your flight gets canceled. How you feel? Well, that's public opinion. And in the fight between labor and management, it can tip the scales. Up first, after 155 years, Campbell's is dropping the soup from its name. It's keeping the iconic can so you'll still recognize the brand. But, and hear me out here, Campbell's. What if you scrapped it all and changed your name to X? It took Elon Musk about a year after buying Twitter to decide he didn't like the name. So he rebranded it X. That was last May. And yet,
Elon Musk on X, formerly known as Twitter.
X, the app formerly known as Twitter, is implementing
social media site X, formerly known as Twitter, the biggest source of fake.
X is still the artist formerly known as Twitter. But it's been a year and a half. Why won't people just call it X?
I call it Twitter, and I will forever call it Twitter.
Heidi Moore joined what was then Twitter in 2008, a few years after it started. She now has more than 100,000 followers. She's a power user, one of the 10% responsible for most of the site's traffic. When she thinks about what Twitter means to her, she remembers the good old days.
Everyone will forget this now because Twitter is commonly called a hell site. And people talk about doom scrolling, and it has a heavy correlation with really negative emotions. But back then, right, in the quote unquote glory days of 2009 to around 2015, it was really friendly.
For a site trying to get off the ground, friendliness was a big deal. You could find yourself talking to anyone at all about something serious or silly.
I remember there was a tweet about how many towels you should have that, ruled Twitter for days and days and days.
Do you remember what your personal answer was to how many towels do you need?
I think I dodged it, actually, because it was so controversial, and I just did not want any part of it. But I think that the original tweet said something like, you should have 15 to 20 towels.
That's a lot of towels. You need fewer towels than that. I don't know if I have a number, but it's less than 20.
Yes, exactly. And I've never counted mine. I'm sure it's definitely less than 20.
Those kinds of conversations still happen, but Heidi says way less. Instead, there are more bots, trolls, nasty replies. This shift is part of why she won't call the site X.
I actually kept the Twitter app, the little bird app, on my phone up until like a few months ago. Like, I refused to even update it to the X logo because the X logo looks like something that you might see on Axe body spray. Like, it is just so Gen X, uber masculine, in your face, over the top. And I still see Twitter in my mind and in my heart as that little blue bird that is trying to fly.
Elon Musk sees it differently. He wants X to be an everything app for banking, shopping, communications. Way more than just a place for posting 280 characters. He also really likes the letter X. X.com was his first company. He founded SpaceX. Tesla has the Model X. But for any rebrand to really work, it takes more than just slapping on a new name. And the common reaction when he X'd out that little blue bird?
What are you doing?
Marcus Collins is a marketing professor at the University of Michigan. He was stunned when they dropped the name Twitter.
Like, why would you do this? Like, there's so much equity. There's so much like a mental availability for the name. You're essentially erasing all the value that the Twitter brand identity had been able to amass.
Marcus says branding is like a snapshot of all the things we feel about a product. Names, logos, color schemes, they all work to trigger our memories. Think about the Apple logo. You can see it in your mind right now, with the little bite out of the side. What does that say to you? Apple wants it to mean plug and play. Pick it up and it just works. And it looks cool. The hope for a brand is to make our brains, at a glance, go,
Oh yeah, I know that thing. It feels familiar. Or they act as a proxy for quality. Go, oh, I know that thing, and they make good products. Or sometimes they create these sort of mental shortcuts that when I think about Nike, I think about sports. They evoke emotion. They make us feel a certain way. They help us differentiate things that are crowded in the marketplace. And ultimately, they justify whether we spend our money or not and how much of that we spend.
if a brand has a lot of goodwill, that means you feel about it the way it wants you to feel. Coca-Cola wants you to think it's thirst-quenching and refreshing. Taste the feeling. Pull that off, and it's a win. If not, could be time to try something else. Sometimes even reset entirely. When Marcus talks to companies about rebranding,
I'll typically start with, well, why you want to rebrand? What's the purpose? And secondly, what do you want to mean? Right? If branding is a meaning-making process, what do you want to mean? And why do you want to mean that?
sometimes the reasons for a rebrand are clear. The accounting firm Arthur Andersen changed its name to Accenture after the Enron scandal. Montreal-based SNC-Lavalin is now Atkins Realis. It wanted to distance itself from a decade of bribery and corruption scandals. A good rebrand can replace one set of negative feelings with different, more positive feelings. But brands also don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. When Google rebranded to Alphabet, the site stayed Google. It's such a part of life, Google is a verb, like tweet and retweet. But now we don't tweet, we post, or X, or whatever. And Marcus says that, or whatever, is a problem. It's not what you're looking for in a rebrand.
For Elon Musk to just, take the name away, take all the likeness away, take all the imagery away, you're essentially burying a thing that has so much equity in the hearts and minds of people for something that we don't have. And you haven't really told us what this thing is other than the fact that it's X, which, of course, ironically, is unknown.
In algebra, X is the unknown variable. It can also mark the spot, symbolize death, or a kiss, like XOXO. X is kinda all over the map. Twitter's little bluebird could also mean different things to different people. It could act as a shortcut for community, connection, or I have a voice. Marcus says good brands act as a shorthand for bigger ideas. In the rebrand to X, the company didn't tell people what it is, or how it's different from Twitter. So we're left to fill in that meaning ourselves. And for many people, Marcus says X has become an extension of Elon Musk.
People who see X as a shortcut for Elon Musk and all the affects and cognitions that are associated to Elon Musk, for those that are negative, people go, I ain't going there. I don't want to be a part of that. People who are, have a greater affinity for Elon Musk, maybe more inclined to stick around, but I don't know how much it's growing as a result of it.
Elon Musk has superfans. Others are turned off by his politics. He's a Trump guy. If you don't vibe with that, maybe you still use the site, but Marcus says you may not call it X.
In some cases, I think that almost using the name feels like a bit of sort of compliance. It almost feels like if I sort of adopt the new lexicon, then I'm sort of complicit in, what X, signifies with regards to the way Elon Musk presents himself to the world and how he talks about what he does. But by pushing against it, there's a bit of resistance. Yeah, it's sort of an irreverence. You go like, nah, I'm not doing that. Call it stubbornness, but I would call it much more of social protest.
Elon bought Twitter for $44 billion US. It's now valued at less than half that. How much does the rebrand play into this? Well, Marcus says it's hard to know exactly, but if X wants to turn things around, what X means to many people, its branding, will have to change.
I mean, it makes it very difficult for the brand to grow. Many people still go to Twitter to engage because they've built an audience there, or they built a community there, or they have people there. But as people continue to erode and leave the platform, you're going to see a decay in the brand's value in society.
For people to stop calling it Twitter, Marcus says X will need to do some work. But winning back hearts and minds won't be easy. Heidi Moore, the OG Twitter fan, is still on the site. She admits that she's stubborn. It's why she still calls it Twitter, and why she hasn't left.
I will say that the reason I haven't is that I think I was there before the current owner, and it should be him who leaves, quite frankly.
Elon paid $44 billion, so he can do what he wants with Twitter. He can turn it into an everything app, or turn off the lights. What he can't do? Make people call it X. This is The Cost of Living. I'm Paul Havershood. Some businesses have been in on birthdays forever. Happy, happy birthday from the Chili's crew. We wish it was our birthday so we could party too. Hey. And then free cake. But these days, more places are getting in on the birthday freebie game. It's become a staple. You can get fried chicken, lip gloss, even Lego. But how free is all this stuff really?
Most people celebrate their birthday with friends. Not Lincoln Ho, because he's convinced he has a birthday curse.
So whenever I have a birthday and there's a party involved with cake, that place goes out of business.
I know what you're thinking. Sounds kind of superstitious. But even when Lincoln moved his birthday party from a restaurant to a friend's house,
They had like a 2-year lease on their rental property. They were evicted within 2 months. So after that, I'm like, okay, no more birthday parties.
now Lincoln spends his birthdays alone, hoovering up as much free stuff as he can.
Free pancakes, free matcha latte, free birthday sandwich.
He takes the whole day off work and drives around Edmonton, making stops at dozens of cafes, stores, and restaurants.
Free fries, free skincare, free salt.
Lincoln runs a website called yegventures.ca. He says in every city and town across Canada, you can score free stuff just for being born. And if you're organized, you can really milk it.
I've put everything into a spreadsheet and I looked for the ones that you can only redeem on your birthday itself. So Starbucks, you get a free birthday drink, but I go for the food items because they cost more. Because I'm a little cheap like that.
Lincoln cashes in big on his birthday, almost $100 worth of free food and merch. So what do businesses get in return? Dun dun dun, the D word.
So data is the most important thing that businesses want.
Nicole Rourke teaches marketing at St. Clair College in Windsor. In order to get that birthday freebie, you usually have to download an app, sign up for a loyalty program, or join an email list.
It's actually very clever of them because, let's face it, we're all little kids at heart and we all like to feel special on our birthday. Doesn't matter if you're 16, 60, or 90, but it is an excuse for them to get in touch with you.
And keep staying in touch long after your birthday. Because you told them where you live, how old you are, and your favorite froyo flavor, that business knows your shopping preferences and whether you're a Gen Z or a boomer, which means they can target you with enticing offers.
Usually there is an incentive to click on their website, visit their store, and there's an expiry date to that. So they're giving you a call to action, generally with a sense of urgency, to really get you to buy something sooner than later. And a lot of us do fall for it, you and I included. We're suckers.
But before you get sucked in, just know some birthday freebies have strings attached. Mac, for example, only hands out gifts to customers who, in the year leading up to their birthday, spent $150 on makeup. And others are kind of lame.
So some of them have become coupons, like buy one, get ones, or you get 5% off of this. It's like, well, 5% is just like GST off, right? So I'm like, is it worth it to even sign up for this and get all of this junk mail?
Over the years, Lincoln has curated his list. He doesn't waste his time on gifts that aren't really free, and he always hits up the granddaddy of birthday swag. The free Denny's breakfast. Sometimes twice.
I figured they're probably working 8 to 12-hour shifts, so the person working in the evening will probably not know that I was there in the morning.
Now that's a grand slam. For the cost of living, I'm Danielle Nerman.
So, Air Canada and its pilots just reached a tentative agreement. Pilots are looking at a raise of 42% over the next 4 years. That's planes. The feds ordered rail workers into binding arbitration. Trains. Automobiles, anyone? In Canada last year, more than 500,000 workers went on strike. That's more people than walked picket lines in the U.S. It was called the Year of the Strike. So, is this a whole country thing? Are we all feeling solidarity forever? Or just solidarity until our flight gets canceled? Barry Eidlin is a sociology professor at McGill, where he studies the history of labor movements. Hi there.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
So, it seems like unions are having a moment. Why is this happening now?
Yeah, I would say they're having a moment, and I would view it as a convergence of intersecting factors. Over the past 3 or so decades, wages and working conditions have deteriorated. So wages have stagnated, pensions aren't as good, losing benefits, unpredictable scheduling. So the quality of work overall has been in decline on average for a lot of Canadians. And then the pandemic had a crystallizing effect. You had these juxtapositions of, millions of Canadians out of work, and then meanwhile CEOs working from home on their yachts. You had these public declarations of workers being declared as essential heroes while being treated as disposable. So that really shone a bright light on some of these growing inequalities and the deterioration of work. Then number 3, coming out of the pandemic, we had a tightened labor market, and that gave workers more structural bargaining power just because they're harder to replace. And so I think the combination of those things has created the conditions that we're observing today.
Do unions have much leverage now, or more leverage than they had in the past?
Certainly more than when you have a slacker labor market. But when workers do go on strike, they are fighting for issues that matter to a broad swath of Canadians. So whereas in previous decades, in more recent decades, you would see workers go on strike and the response would be one of resentment. It would be something like, oh, they're fighting to protect their pension, but, I don't have a pension, so why should they get one? Now it's flipped. And what we're seeing is more of a sense of they're fighting for something that I want too. And if they get it, then maybe I stand a chance of getting it too. And so there's broad public support behind them.
How do we know that? I mean, is that measurable?
That is in polling data, right? Not obviously every single strike, but take, for example, last year, the biggest strikes by far were the Front Commun or Common Front strikes in the Quebec public sector. And that was primarily in the education and healthcare sectors. And the polling data there showed that not only were there strong majorities of Quebecers who were backing the strikers, but it was precisely the groups who were most affected by the strikes, who were most inconvenienced, like parents of school-aged children, who supported the strikers the most.
Well, what about when something happens like the feds order binding arbitration between rail companies and rail workers? What does that do to the leverage that workers have or are feeling right now?
So the problem with these government interventions to force binding arbitration and force workers back to work is that it has a corrosive effect on the entire collective bargaining regime, right? You need that backstop of a credible right to strike in order for the entire apparatus to work properly. And so this move towards back to work orders essentially removes employers' incentive to come to the table and to reach agreement. And so even if it might get rid of the immediate problem, so like if you're flying, next week, yes, your flight stands a better chance of taking off than if there wasn't back to work orders. Over the long term, it undermines collective bargaining and it kicks the can down the road because it doesn't address the underlying issues that are driving the workers' move to strike in the first place.
Well, is there a tension between the inconvenience of strikes, and in some cases more than inconvenience, like with the railway strike, what it was going to mean for Canada's economy, or if Air Canada or WestJet pilots go on strike, people getting stranded at airports, all of that. Is there a tension between those kinds of disruptions and the public support that you're saying is growing? Because I would think that, you'd be, yes, all right, union strikes, that's great, until you're trying to fly for a long weekend, and then you're like, oh, wait.
Yeah. No, I mean, there is an element of inconvenience and more than inconvenience, economic chaos in some cases. But that's the point, right? That's the leverage.
So when you think about perceptions of employers versus perceptions of workers, if you were to look at something like Air Canada negotiating with its pilots union, what is your read on how Air Canada handles the PR side of things?
I mean, obviously, they are highlighting the chaos of, destroyed vacations and people stranded at airports and all that kind of stuff, and trying to sort of pin that on the workers, saying that, if they would just get back to work, we wouldn't be having these problems. But the potential problem is that they're dealing with a workforce that could be viewed in two ways. On the one hand, they could be viewed as these sort of privileged fat cats who make six-figure salaries, and what are they complaining about? Or people could think about, people love pilots. They're in their uniforms, they're highly respected, they take care of us. And so if the company is seen as trying to screw these sympathetic groups of workers, that could really backfire.
Does it matter what someone is doing and how much money they're making? Like if you are a pilot and let's say you're making, six figures or north of six figures, does the public think about you differently than they would, say, like a frontline grocery store worker who's making much closer to minimum wage?
I mean, yes, but it also depends a lot on the reference point, right? People don't think about questions of wages as much in absolute terms, right? They're not thinking like, okay, they're making $15 an hour versus this person's making $50 an hour, and this is, therefore they're more privileged and they're less privileged. It's more of a relational concept. So in the case of the pilots, yes, pilots are well paid, but then the way that the Air Canada pilots are talking about it is that there's a serious pay equity issue at stake, right? And from their perspective, from the Air Canada pilots' perspective, what they're seeing is they're sitting on the tarmac, they're sharing the same airspace with pilots from all these other airlines. They're doing the same work, same equipment, same routes in the same airspace, like I said, but the other pilots for the American Airlines are making twice as much. And I think Canadians can understand basic fairness issues. And so when it's framed that way, then it seems like, well, they're getting a raw deal, even if it's a lot more than you yourself might be making.
So if you're someone and you're listening to this conversation that we're having right now and you're in a union, you're pro-union, you're probably like nodding along and saying, yeah, you know what, Barry's talking truth here. But if you're part of the non-unionized workforce, should you be looking at what's happening with unionized workers when they're making gains? Like, does that matter to you at all?
Absolutely. I think especially because, unionized workers are often at larger companies and the public sector, which have the power to shape labor markets. And so what unionized workers get at the bargaining table, especially when we're talking about, these core issues about meeting the cost of living, fighting for, decent time off or stuff like that, this sort of sets patterns for the broader labor market.
So it's like a rising tide when it comes to wages can lift all boats.
Yeah, exactly.
So organized labor unions, they're getting some wins right now, Barry, but where is this going? And if we step back and look at the broader economy, it's slowing down. Unemployment is ticking up. Is there a window of opportunity right now that could be closing, or do you see it as remaining pretty open?
Yes, it could be a window of opportunity closing, but it's too early to tell where that's headed. I think the issues that are at stake are not going away. What could go away is the broader momentum. But so far, we have not seen signs of a slowdown by any stretch. But whether it takes off even more remains an open question.
So we'll see if workers of the world actually continue to unite. Barry Eidland, thanks a lot for that.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Barry Eidland is a sociology professor at McGill, where he studies the history of labor movements. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Danielle Nerman, Ellis Cho, and Jennifer Keene, with help from Caroline Ferris. I'm Paul Abersrud. Thanks for listening.